Chapter 1526. Strange Beasts. Zhang Yi frowned slightly. The power of his attack just now was definitely not stronger than before. So there was no reason for this bullet to seriously injure the evil boy. Therefore, he judged that the other party deliberately accepted his attack. "Are you acting?" Zhang Yi said coldly. The evil boy's body stabilized on the ground. He stood up straight. His clothes were damaged by the impact, revealing his naked and skinny upper body like a mummy. On his chest, the scars left by the bullet had healed quickly. He looked at Zhang Yi with a smile. "It's so refreshing. It's been a long time since I felt such pain. Hey, Chaos. Let me feel more pain." The evil boy clapped his hands at Zhang Yi. His face was extremely crazy. Zhang Yi stared, pondered for less than a second, and said, "Okay." He simply took out 2 white owls with both hands, aimed at the evil boy, and began to fire holy silver bullets continuously. The holy silver bullets wrapped in the power of the void carried a destructive force. He wanted to see how strong the defense of this guy in front of him was, and why he was so confident that he could take all his attacks. The dense rain of bullets poured down on the evil boy, and the area where he was destroyed in an instant. The terrifying void sphere swallowed up everything within the target range. The body of the evil boy was swaying in the rain of bullets, like a banana leaf in a storm. But he didn't have any expression of pain, but laughed happily, as if he enjoyed the pain very much. "Ha, it's so good, so good. Keep going, keep letting me feel more pain." After Zhang Yi fired all the bullets in the 2 magazines, the surrounding land had already turned into a sunken hole. But what made him incredible was that the evil boy was standing there. His body was not without any damage, but it was repaired the moment the injury appeared. Even if the muscles and bones were exposed, they would heal quickly. An alien from the strengthening system? No, it's not that simple. Because Zhang Yi had seen that the evil boy had become strange and abnormal at this time. His body turned into a strange red color, and rolling heat waves spread from his body. Even his breath became scorching, as if a red-hot iron ball. The evil boy raised his head and looked at Zhang Yi in front of him, and laughed. Hee. Then he suddenly opened his mouth, and a terrifying energy quickly condensed into shape. Outer Dao. Underworld Cannon. The terrifying power penetrated the space between the 2 of them in an instant and reached directly in front of Zhang Yi. 3,000 dimensional gates blocked the 2 of them, but in just a moment, more than a dozen dimensional gates were destroyed. Such a terrifying power made Zhang Yi unable to help but retreat thousands of meters away. To be able to break through my current dimensional gate, his attack power must be at least 20,000 points. But I seem to have figured out this guy's ability. After launching an attack, the evil boy's body returned to normal. And every time he launched an attack, he was actually bearing Zhang Yi's attack. In other words, his ability is to absorb the opponent's attack and then counterattack after accumulating a certain amount of energy. In other words, the reason why the evil boy was able to smash Zhang Yi's dimensional door was because he used Zhang Yi's own power. Although I understand a little if you think about it carefully, this guy's ability is really amazing. First get beaten, then fight back. At least you need to have an absolutely strong defensive ability. The evil boy looked at Zhang Yi in the distance and clapped his hands hard. "Come on, continue. Let me see how strong you are." The 3 men in black, who were watching the battle in the distance, looked at the scene with an extremely calm tone. Although the guy from the Dragon Country has some strength, this is Edo. The evil boy who is carefully cultivated by us cannot be defeated here. The outcome is determined. If he absorbs his origin, the evil boy's strength will be further improved. Even if they realized that Zhang Yi's strength is now extraordinary. But they didn't think that the evil boy would lose. Because this is Edo, the evil boy has an incomparable advantage here. Haven. A black shadow raised his head and looked up at the sky, where the space has been blocked. Even if Zhang Yi wanted to escape, he couldn't. On the battlefield, Zhang Yi realized the ability of the evil boy, and a sneer appeared on the corner of his mouth. "Can you absorb energy attacks and rebound? Then, pure physical attacks, can you absorb it?" Zhang Yi put away the white owl, and the sword in the tree in his right hand took shape again. He fell to the ground, and the sword in his hand directly inserted into the ground.
Boom, boom, boom.
With the output of his supernatural power, a huge forest rose from the ground and rushed towards the evil boy. In just a moment, Zhang Yi evolved a large primitive jungle, and the extremely thick vines were like giant snakes, strangling the evil boy. The evil boy twisted his neck and charged forward fearlessly. He looked skinny and like a demon, but his body seemed to contain endless power. Those huge vines in front of him were torn into pieces by his claws like paper. But the most powerful thing about the sword in the tree is that it can regenerate infinitely. The vines torn by the evil boy will soon grow again from the broken stubble, endlessly, entwining his body. The evil boy was soon submerged by the sea of vines, and a large number of vines tightened, trapping him in a huge green cage. Under the immortal mountain, a giant vine sphere with a diameter of hundreds of meters appeared, and it was still growing. But a moment later, a strong light burst out through the gaps in the vines. Boom! The vine sphere was directly shattered, and the evil boy soared into the air, then waved his ferocious claws and pounced on Zhang Yi. At some point, 2 pairs of black wings sprouted from his back, looking like the wings of a fly, pitch black, and even covered with disgusting mucus. Even his mouth parts were split, no longer in human shape. An alien beast species, Zhang Yi said lightly. He was not in a hurry, and aimed the sword in the tree in his hand at the extremely evil boy in the air, and once again gushed out a large number of vines. The vines of the sword in the tree are not afraid of being destroyed. With Zhang Yi's superpowers, it is enough to maintain it for a long time to grow a large number of vines. What's more, Zhang Yi carries supplies with him and does not need to worry about the problem of insufficient superpowers. This is the most troublesome weapon. Only when you face it in person you will know how difficult it is.
When
the extremely evil boy flying in the air saw the scene, a look of hatred flashed in his eyes. Countless vines entangled like a giant dragon, and when they approached his body, they suddenly spread out like petals, as if they had opened a big net to catch him. The evil boy opened his mouth and fired the hellfire cannon again, cutting through like a sharp scalpel, chopping all the vines into pieces. In an instant, it was enough for him to pounce on Zhang Yi. Chapter 1527 Edo Boundary. At this time, Zhang Yi could confirm one thing. The absorption ability of the evil boy can only absorb energy-level attacks, but not physical attacks. In this way, your rebound attack will be weakened. It can't threaten me. Of course, you will most likely have other means. Let's wait and see. Zhang Yi smiled slightly, and at the moment when the evil boy approached, he opened the dimensional door and directly distanced himself from him. The evil boy was stunned for a moment, and then a ferocious smile appeared on his face. He flashed and chased after Zhang Yi, who appeared in the air. In his pupils, the pupils began to split strangely, turning into 4, 8, and 16 pupils. The compound eyes, like flies, can allow him to dynamically capture the movements of almost 360 degrees around him. Zhang Yi continued to use the sword in the tree to harass him. But that guy was very agile, using his wings to fly in the air. When he was not on the ground, the agility of the sword in the tree was obviously limited. He could not block the movements of the evil boy in time. At this time, Zhang Yi's most powerful attack method could not be used, and he had to continue to distance himself from the evil boy. However, when he activated this space shuttle ability again, he was unable to complete the displacement after reaching a limit. Behind him, an invisible barrier appeared, hindering his teleportation. Zhang Yi's pupils shrank suddenly, and he reached out to touch the area behind him. I don't know when, the large area around the immortal mountain was sealed by a layer of barrier. Have these guys prepared a means to deal with my arrivals? Zhang Yi stood high in the sky and looked down. The flow of supernatural power could clearly see that from the 4 directions of Edo, mysterious forces rose like water, gathered in the sky, and formed a huge barrier. The source of these powers is some ancient temples in Edo City. One after another, the empty torii stretched across the sky, as if suppressing something, forming a barrier. Tori is one of the most important seals in Neon Shintoism and is often seen in front of temples, used to suppress evil spirits. Now, the outsider Zhang-yi is just like an evil spirit in the eyes of the Japanese. This is a little troublesome. Zhang-yi frowned slightly. The appearance of the barrier prevented him from leaving here freely, and he could only shuttle in a limited space. The evil boy seemed to have understood this a long time ago. At least, he knew Zhang-yi's spatial ability and prepared such a means. Ha ha ha. He laughed ferociously, disappeared from the spot like lightning, and then rushed towards Zhang-yi like a cannonball. The terrifying mouth opened wide, and the outer path dark fire cannon aimed at Zhang-yi again, cutting the dimension gate like a scalpel of several thousand meters. Swish! The outer path dark fire cannon shot at the dimension gate. But Zhang-yi laughed. Before absorbing his attack, relying solely on the power of the evil boy, it was impossible to destroy his dimension gate. Although the title of absolute defense is not entirely correct, at least in terms of the defensive attributes of the dimension gate, it is absolutely true. Finding that his attack could not break Zhang-yi's defense, the eyes of the evil boy also became gloomy. Sure enough, just like the title, it's a hard-to-break turtle shell. After reaching the realm of Epsilon, no alien is a waste. They are all extraordinary geniuses. It is extremely difficult to kill an Epsilon head-on unless you have an absolute crushing in terms of strength. The evil boy spread his hands. This is perfect. I can play with you slowly. He opened his arms widely. Anyway, this is my home court. He was right, this is his home court. As an outsider, Zhang-yi could not consume him endlessly here. The longer the battle lasts, the more disadvantageous it will be for them. Not to mention the emitting aliens who are constantly supporting from the outside world, and the difficult-to-judge Columbia Navy. Just the unkillable 100 Ghosts night parade below will cause them great trouble. Huahua can hold them back for a while, but a beast against a group of unkillable monsters will sooner or later get into trouble. So from the beginning, Zhang-yi's plan was to directly defeat the evil boy head-on, and then enter the Sky Keep. If he didn't find a way to break the deadlock, he and the evil boy would have to fight for a month. Huh. Zhang-yi exhaled a breath of fall air from his mouth, staring coldly at the evil boy below. There has never been any absolute defense in this world. Even I, Zhang-yi, dare not say that my all things are invincible. And what makes you think you can do that? He stretched out his left hand towards the evil boy, with his index finger and middle finger together. Indestructible. As long as the power is strong enough, even the strongest defense will be broken. God's domain purification. The most powerful instantaneous attack within a short and medium distance is launched. The evil boy did not expect such an attack at all. There was no sign or track, and it was directly aimed at him body. In an instant, his hungry ghost-like body was squeezed hard towards the center by a huge force. Crack. Crack. The sound of broken bones was clearly audible, and his body twisted in a strange posture, almost compressed into a sphere. Crack. A large mouthful of blood spurted out of his mouth. The feeling of pain made his face distorted, but there was an indescribable joy in his eyes. His body quickly turned red and warm. Although he suffered a strong injury, he still forcibly absorbed this force. Then, a foreign fire cannon was fired in the direction of Zhang-yi. But this time, Zhang-yi already knew what he was going to do, so he no longer chose to block it head-on. The ability of all things to track the traces had been activated as early as when he made his move. So Zhang-yi used the ability of Space Shuttle to avoid this sharp attack like a surgical scalpel. The red foreign fire cannon shot towards the distant sky, which was particularly dazzling in the dark night. Zhang-yi looked at the extremely evil boy with a twisted body and obtained another piece of information. His defense also has its limits. A strong enough force can cause him serious injuries. There is even a chance to kill him directly. But there is still one thing that is very troublesome. Zhang-yi stared at the evil boy. He saw that his body was falling in the air, but it quickly unfolded, and the broken bones and wings were quickly repaired. Soon, he was suspended in the air in the same posture as before. Ha ha ha. Great, you really have stronger means.
Come on, continue.
The evil boy laughed ferociously. Chapter 15:28 Restrictions. Looking at the difficult evil boy, Zhang Yi was not panicked at all. Unknown things are always the most difficult to deal with, but once you understand the opponent's abilities, especially the weaknesses, it will become easy to fight. This is why Zhang Yi always says that intelligence is the most important reason for the battle between aliens. At least now, it has been figured out that Zhang Yi's attack can exceed the threshold of his energy absorption. However, the evil boy has a strong self-healing ability. It is unlikely to kill him instantly, so will the opponent always heal himself? Impossible. The consumption of superpowers also has its upper limit, so, as long as you continue to attack, you can break his limit. Zhang Yi took out the superpower food from the alien space and began to replenish his energy. From now on, he will attack in a violent mode. After the superpower food was eaten, the feeling of the lost power recovery appeared. Zhang Yi stared at the evil boy, and the murderous intent in his eyes began to spread. This feeling was also felt by the evil boy. His eyes became more crazy, and he opened his arms to provoke Zhang Yi. Come on, let's see who will die first between the two of us? But I can tell you generously that it must be you. Even the Black Shadow watching the battle said, in Edo Castle, the evil boy cannot be killed. Zhang Yi said nothing, but behind him, a huge vortex of void began to emerge. The power from the void is Zhang Yi's greatest source of power. The powerful void energy condensed in the tip of the sword in the tree, and suddenly burst out at the evil boy. Simple and unpretentious, but extremely lethal means of attack. Condensed void. The dark void energy turned into a slender beam of light several thousand meters long, directly hitting the chest of the evil boy. The power of this attack actually penetrated the chest of the evil boy. Obviously, the lethality of the divine realm pure tribulation has not been completely eliminated, and the wound on his chest still exists. After being injured twice, his body was directly penetrated. The void sword carried the evil boy and headed straight for the immortal mountain. It actually shot through the entire immortal mountain with one sword. The evil boy looked extremely embarrassed at this time, just like a worn-out piece of clothing hung on a clothesline. He looked down at the wound on his chest, and under his painful and twisted face, there was a look of crazy joy. The void sword disappeared, and the evil boy fell from the air. On his chest, something white was wriggling, repairing his injuries. Hot air flow surged from his body, and a huge amount of energy began to condense in his mouth. Zhang Yi did not hesitate, and the dimensional door behind him opened, ready to escape at any time. The body of the evil boy changed again. His limbs began to extend, and the length of his arms and legs reached nearly 2 meters. The whole person lay on the ground, like a demon in the neon urban legend. He stared at Zhang Yi with vicious eyes, and the outer fire cannon in his mouth accumulated powerful energy, ready to launch a fatal blow. This blow can hurt him, or it can penetrate Zhang Yi's dimensional door. After all, this was an absolutely powerful attack from Zhang Yi himself, and the force was so strong that even Zhang Yi's own dimensional gate could not withstand it. Boom! After locking Zhang Yi's position, this attack exploded. It arrived in front of Zhang Yi in an instant, and it even felt like there was no time difference. But at the moment when the outer fire cannon was about to hit Zhang Yi disappeared from the spot. A moment later, Zhang Yi appeared from another direction. The attack of the extremely evil boy missed. Zhang Yi fell lightly from the air, ready to launch a new round of attacks on the extremely evil boy. He had already seen that every time the extremely evil boy seemed to have repaired his body injuries, it would take time. If the damage was caused by a strong enough force, it would not be completely repaired in a short time. This is in line with common sense. Otherwise, the ability to repair all of one's own injuries in an instant would be too terrifying. The extremely evil boy saw that the attack missed again, and an incredible look flashed in his eyes. Impossible! Why can he dodge my attack every time? Not to mention the extremely evil boy, even the 3 shadows in the distance became solemn. The more energy the evil boy's outer path dark fire cannon accumulates, the higher the upper limit of its attack power and speed will be. Logically speaking, with the speed of the Dragon Country Kid, he should be unable to dodge it. Unless... Another black shadow glanced at him and continued, unless he predicts the trajectory of the attack in advance. Do you mean that he has the ability of time attribute? This is a bit scary. Time and space, the dual attribute of ability, is extremely rare. Is our intelligence not good enough? The three black shadows were all moved. They stared at Zhang Yi on the battlefield with some murderous intent in their eyes. A black shadow said, "Otherwise, we will kill him. Let this guy live. He may be a huge threat to us in the future." Another figure said, "No, we can't take action now. Otherwise, we will face a catastrophe." The black shadow fell into silence, thinking for a long time, and finally did not speak again. The battle between Zhang Yi and the evil boy continued. The longer the battle lasts, the understanding between them is deeper. Zhang Yi has seen that the healing speed of the evil boy is limited. As long as he is killed by continuous attacks before he recovers, he can win. The evil boy probably also found that Zhang Yi can predict his attack trajectory. Zhang Yi kept flashing in the air, making it difficult for the evil boy to catch up with him. Then, there was a move of divine domain purification that was absolutely impossible to defend. The powerful pressure caused the evil boy to fall into serious injuries. Zhang Yi noticed that every time he was injured, some white wriggling things would emerge from his body to block his wounds. "It doesn't matter. As long as I find your weakness, I can slowly kill you. It won't take too long." The ability of tracking all things and predicting 2 seconds in advance gave Zhang Yi the upper hand in the battle. With the attack method of the evil boy, he couldn't do anything to him. At this time, the evil boy obviously realized this. He lay on the ground, looking up at Zhang Yi in the air with vicious and ferocious eyes. Suddenly, an inexplicable smile appeared on his face. Then his body changed strangely, his abdomen bulged high, as if something was about to be born. The next moment, he raised his head to Zhang Yi, opened his mouth, and spit out a large ball of white stuff with a wow sound. The moment he saw that thing, Zhang Yi's face became extremely ugly. Chapter 15:29 Guns and Cannons. The evil boy opened his mouth and spit out a large ball of white stuff, which flew towards the air. Zhang Yi was initially suspicious, not knowing what kind of attack he was going to make. But after seeing the true face of the thing, his face showed an extremely distorted expression, as if he had eaten a fly alive. Because what he spit out was actually a huge white worm several dozen centimeters long. The head of the worm was a circle of black. Although it was very large, when Zhang Yi saw it for the first time, he could only imagine one thing: maggots. The evil boy opened his mouth and actually spewed out a large number of giant maggots from his mouth. They were fired into the sky like cannonballs, heading straight for Zhang Yi. Fuck. Zhang Yi was so scared that he spit out a Chinese quintessence. Anyone who saw so many giant maggots crawling towards him would be disgusted. He immediately activated his space shuttle ability to leave the area. The evil boy's worm-spitting behavior continued, and a large number of giant maggots were thrown out by him at will. The most terrifying thing is that those maggots can actually hover in the air and then chase Zhang Yi. The sky, the ground, the jungle, there are these maggots everywhere. Wherever they pass, everything on the earth is withering. Zhang Yi's pupils constricted. He was suspended in the air, and a large number of maggots around him were chasing him. Looking at those squirming white things, he almost vomited the overnight meal. Not to mention him, Yang Xinxin and Mu Yan, who were hiding in the shadow space at this time, also retched. These things made Yang Xinxin, who was always calm, tremble and couldn't bear to look directly. These guys can absorb energy. Zhang Yi resisted the discomfort in his heart. Although he also hated these disgusting things, what kind of Shura hell had he not seen in these years? He had seen rotten corpses and the smelly Jingguan hell. He had a certain adaptability to this kind of thing. But now, he finally knew where the extremely evil boy's ability to absorb the attack energy of others came from. The evil boy is a huge mother body, with a large number of giant maggots hidden in his stomach. Zhang Yi resisted the nausea and attacked with a divine domain purification. In an instant, a large number of maggots were gathered together and then squeezed hard. Puff! A very clear explosion sound came from the air, and the maggots were squeezed and broken, and the smelly mucus fell from the air. But what Zhang Yi didn't expect was that his divine domain purification didn't kill all the maggots, and more than half of the maggots survived his attack. After all, they are mollusks, and such attacks can provide them with enough buffer in the event of the death of their companions. The evil boy below was still spitting out maggots, and in a blink of an eye, there were all these things around. After a long time, the evil boy stopped spitting. Disgusting and smelly mucus flowed from the corners of his mouth, and he looked up at Zhang Yi in the air crazily. Enjoy the feeling of being sucked dry by my babies. The master of the Yumal court, the evil boy, has the ability code name, Nomadic World. Those giant wriggling maggots are a group of captive monsters that only know how to devour everything. Facing such a scene, Zhang Yi felt his scalp tingling for a while. Because there were maggots everywhere, no matter how he used space to shuttle, as long as he was restricted by the space around the immortal mountain, he would be eroded by these worms. But he had to take action because these maggots had already drilled into his space. Then, they began to frantically absorb the energy of Zhang Yi's space. They have extremely strong bodies, and even Zhang Yi had to spend a lot of effort to kill them. Especially when they entered the space, even Zhang Yi was somewhat helpless against them. After all, strictly speaking, the space only exists as a storage space and has no other killing ability except trapping and killing opponents. A large number of maggots entered Zhang Yi's space, and Zhang Yi couldn't get rid of them. Otherwise, these things would crawl directly onto his body. Zhang Yi's face turned pale, not because of fear, but because normal humans would have this reaction. As expected of Little Neon, it's really perverted and disgusting. Zhang Yi cursed fiercely. He had to choose to sacrifice a circle of dimensional gates outside to temporarily delay the actions of these maggots. But this is not a long-term solution. Because after devouring his alien space, these maggots will become stronger and continue to devour his next layer of alien space. Zhang Yi took out his pistol and attacked them continuously. But these guys are too difficult to kill, and there are too many of them. It even takes 2 or 3 bullets to completely wipe out a maggot. The evil boy laughed wildly. He seemed to have seen Zhang Yi's dilemma, so he flapped his wings and flew into the air, attacking Zhang Yi. The situation seemed to have become very bad. Zhang Yi's eyebrows stood up, his brain was running fast, thinking about countermeasures. The power of the void, which he was proud of, could not end the battle quickly at this time. Physical attack is the best means.
Then,
Zhang Yi's eyes flashed with a fierce look. You force me to do this. He was not good at physical attacks, but he had plenty of props. The 3,000 dimensional gates were completely opened. Countless black gun barrels and cannon barrels stretched out from the dimensional gates, so dense that they almost covered the entire sky. There were so many guns and cannons that a huge sphere formed around Zhang Yi's body, aiming in all directions without any blind spots. Such means made the originally proud evil boy look shocked. Fire! Zhang Yi waved his hand, and the intelligent system connected to the launch device. In an instant, 100,000 level guns and cannons began to bombard indiscriminately in all directions. The artillery attack without blind spots and the ammunition that was finer than the rainstorm poured out freely. It was as if a huge fireball appeared in the sky, extremely hot, and the strong light covered everything. Such a scene made even the people who were fighting in other battlefields dumbfounded. They couldn't see anything clearly because the light of the 100,000 level guns was too dazzling. They couldn't hear anything because the deafening roar almost shattered their eardrums. The evil boy only felt a dazzling fire in front of his eyes, and then his whole body was shot by bullets continuously, reaching thousands of bullets per second, throwing him to the ground. What followed was the broken maggots, which were blasted into white slurry in midair. Chapter 1530, Nomadic World. There is no attack at the level of force that is simpler and purer than the artillery fire of a legion. In this world, only Zhang Yi can launch such an attack, with the power of one person. Everyone around the undying mountain was stunned by this move, and some even thought it was a replay of the disaster that happened to the two major cities of Neon 100 years ago. When the evil boy felt the pain, his body had been thrown into the ground by a huge force, and the maggots he vomited were also smashed to pieces. No matter how strong the body is, it can't stop the endless artillery fire. As Zhang Yi expected, these maggots can devour energy, but they can't directly absorb the kinetic energy of warheads and shrapnel. Even if the defense is strong enough, being torn apart is an inevitable consequence. The magnificent rain of artillery fire soon stopped. Zhang Yi hovered in the air, and the guns and cannons around him were like a huge steel Nathan ball. At this moment, he was the king of war. He looked around, and all the maggots were wiped out. Zhang Yi took a deep breath. I wasted so much ammunition in one breath. After I go back, I have to ask Koran to replenish it for me. One bombing is enough to support a small-scale war of thousands of people. Wasting resources is no joke. Fortunately, Zhang Yi has abundant supplies. He looked down at the earth and looked in the direction of the evil boy. All the insects in your body that can absorb energy have been killed. Now, let me see if you can still withstand my frontal attack. Zhang Yi raised the sword in the tree in his hand, and the huge void vortex behind him emerged again. The dark power was condensed by him at the top of the sword, and soon formed a huge void energy sphere. The tip of the sword was aimed at the direction of the evil boy, and the evil boy, at this time, had just crawled out from deep in the ground. In Zhang Yi's eyes, his figure did not move at all, which means that in the next 2 seconds, the evil boy is not thinking about how to escape, but to take Zhang Yi's attack again. What an arrogant boy. Then I will kill you. Boom. The tip of the sword in the tree released a black energy beam, which instantly penetrated the area between the two and shot directly at the chest of the evil boy. Then it penetrated him. The evil boy was no longer able to stop Zhang Yi's attack at this time. The large amount of nomadic insects released in his body weakened his ability to absorb energy. The long light of the void tore his chest, almost splitting his entire body in half. The moment the energy disappeared, he was hit hard from a high altitude and fell to the ground. The wound was extremely scary, because the chest area connecting his upper and lower torso only had a thin layer of skin and flesh on the edge. The 3 black shadows watching the game on the sidelines were also a little surprised when they saw this. How miserable. This is the first time that the evil boy has suffered such a huge injury since his debut. Another black shadow looked at the other two. If it wasn't an Edo, he would have died. The boy from the Dragon Country is really strong. Although I don't want to admit it, the power of that civilization may be stronger than ours. What should we do? Should we attack directly? There is no need. This is an Edo, he can't die. As if to confirm their conversation, the evil boy lay on the ground with a dull look, looking up at the sky. However, there was no expression of pain and despair on his face. Instead, he was excited. It has been too long since anyone has been forced into such a situation. The pain of his body being torn apart gave him an indescribable pleasure in his heart. He vaguely remembered the time before the end of the world. At that time, he was a homeless man begging on the roadside. In order to survive, he had to look for food in the trash can every day.
What
impressed him most was that when he opened the dirty trash can lid, the smelly garbage was crawling with maggots. Those things will plunder all the nutrients in the food. No matter how bad the environment is, you can see their wriggling figures. The evil boy hates these abominable things. But after a long time, he is afraid that they don't exist. Because there is no maggot in the trash can, there is a high probability that there will be no food. People like him are like maggots in this city. Dirty, redundant, not cared by anyone and only greeted with disgust. He greedily absorbs nutrients that others don't want in the city's garbage dump, just to live like a maggot. This world has turned me into a dirty maggot, so I will turn this world into a huge cesspool. Ha ha ha. The evil boy laughed happily. He stood up, and the hole in his chest began to wriggle. A dozen maggots rushed in from other places, spitting out white mucus to repair his body. The evil boy raised his head and looked up at Zhang Yi in the air. Chaos, you are honored to see what I really look like. He opened his arms as if embracing this huge cesspool. Nomadic world. Top floor. The moment the words fell, his body exploded with a boom. It was like opening Pandora's box. Countless maggots swarmed out crazily, just like a tide. At the same time, in the entire Edo city, those species people who were in standby mode raised their heads one by one. They opened their mouths, and a huge white maggot came out with a puff sound. Puff. 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 The same sound echoed throughout Edo, and those maggots crawled out of the mouths of the species people, and their bodies covered with mucus quickly crawled all over the streets of Edo. Hundreds of thousands of white maggots crawled madly towards the immortal mountain from all directions. The white maggots gathered into an ocean, and any human who saw such a scene would cause great physical discomfort. Zhang Yi saw this scene and resisted the nausea in his heart. If he hadn't seen the scene of the evil boy vomiting maggots before, this scene would definitely make him vomit. Now I finally understand what these species people are all about. The evil boy turned the entire Edo city into a culture dish for his maggots, and maggots grew in the bodies of all the species people. And he also used this method to gain powerful strength. This vicious and dirty method is simply terrifying. This method is too neon, beyond Zhang Yi's imagination. However, it is not surprising that this method comes from a beggar living at the bottom of Edo. Brother, are the weapons enough to support the next battle?
Ugh.
Yang Xinshin said while vomiting. Zhang Yi was also helpless. Looking at the sea of maggots all over Edo below, he shook his head. The amount of weapons in stock is not enough to destroy this sea of maggots.